Thank you for tuning in to the Uli Museum podcast. I'm Winnie Hour, your host. Today we're here with Kenneth Montague, who's going to talk to us about the exciting world of art collecting.
Hey,
Kenneth
how are you?
is Kenneth is a Toronto-based art collector and also the founder and director of Wedge Curatorial Projects, a non-profit organization which promotes alternative perspectives on community and culture. Thank you so much for joining today, Kenneth. How are you doing?
Just fine. Everything's great here in Toronto, and I wish you could see the beautiful sun, which you probably can't see because you're in London, where there is no sun. But no,
Do you
that's
know
not true.
what? Surprisingly, the sun has just come out.
Oh, I
So
stand
we had
corrected. I
great
stand
weather
corrected.
over the weekend, and you could just see lots of people out in their shorts and lack of tops. So there you go.
Well, good for you. Good for you. It's actually Canada Day here, our national holiday, the
Oh,
yeah, July 1st, which is why I've got the red and white on our national colors. So
happy
right here.
Canada Day. So what's the tradition? What do you do on Canada Day?
There's a big concert, a kind of Glastonbury, Woodstock kind of thing that's at on Capitol Hill and Parliament Hill, are sort of Parliament buildings in Ottawa, our
Okay.
capital city, and a lot of Toronto artists, musicians, and so forth will be taking part in that. We all watch it on television remotely. It's kind of become the sort of go-to event. But there's a lot going on in Toronto this weekend. It also happens to be Pride weekend, so there was a gay pride parade yesterday that the whole city took part in, and it's a month away from my wedding in Toronto, so lots is going on, lots is
Sounds
happening.
sounds super exciting. Sounds very, very exciting. I wish I was in Toronto.
Yeah, which you were too.
So we would like to cover the what, the how, and the where of art collecting. So why don't we
Yes.
start with a bit of background? Do you remember the first piece you bought and why? Why did you purchase it?
Yeah, I do actually. In terms of serious art in the collection, and not just some little things that I might have picked up at the odd show when I was at university. I guess the first important piece was a photograph, and the photograph was by the African American artist James Van Der Zee, and it's that famous image of the couple in raccoon coats, and that's in Harlem on the Harlem Renaissance in the 1930s, and it's a photograph that I'd seen when I was a 10-year-old,
Oh
uh,
wow.
which was really great. I remember it from when I was a kid in Detroit. I was born and grew up in Windsor, which is the southernmost Canadian city, maybe 4 hours west of Toronto. My parents are Jamaican immigrants, and we sort of grew up like a little island. There were maybe one or two other Jamaican families in a city of over 100,000. And Detroit was this sort of bastion of black culture and Motown music, and into the 70s with Black Power movement. And they had this great institution, Detroit Institute of Arts.
Yeah.
And yeah, we used to go over there. My father was studying, doing a master's in industrial arts. And my mom who was a dietitian, she would take us on her day off on a Saturday, and we'd all sit, like the three kids, in the library and, study things, or we'd go to see a sports event. And sometimes we'd go to that DIA and check whatever exhibition was on. And I can remember seeing that work, how it just spoke to me.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary. I mean, for a kid to see this thing and to kind of rethink Black American history. It was certainly not what I was learning at school, like seeing this possibly sophisticated couple,
Absolutely.
in front of this brownstone with their beautiful car with the white wall tires. And for me, it was a new vision. It made me sort of dive into that focus, Black identity, with my art collection as time went on.
Okay. So so you noticed this photograph first time when you were 10 years old. So when did
Right.
you end up acquiring it? What was the time gap between the first time you saw it, fell in
Well,
love, and then
well,
the next time you saw it again and decided to
right, right.
buy
When I was 12, no, that's not true. When I
it?
was yeah, when I was maybe 30, and a dentist in Toronto, I'd studied at University of Toronto, and had sort of worked the first 5 years or so building up a practice, and hadn't been collecting art yet. But I had an opportunity it was the late 90s, to sort of open a gallery in my home. We called it the Wedge Gallery because it was a wedge-shaped space, but also this double meaning. It was kind of intended for artists. I was trying to wedge into the mainstream of contemporary art. So it became this sort of well-known spot in Toronto that focused on artists that were exploring Black identity. And one of the first shows we had in 1999 was James Van Der Zee. We brought the work up from New York. His wife survived him, and we brought Donna Mussenden Van Der Zee to Toronto. I chose maybe 20 images from a catalog. We had them printed up. At that time, it was a commercial gallery, and I was actually selling work. And one that I bought for myself was that beautiful image of the couple in raccoon coat. So it kind of came around in a very organic way as I sort of moved into selling art and then ultimately into curatorial work and becoming an art collector myself.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. I, what I'm getting from that is it sounds to me that you obviously passion plays quite a huge role in what you choose to collect. What do you think is the best strategy in terms of collecting? I'm talking about having a passion for something that you've seen that's spoken to you versus an investment.
That's a very good question. You have to take your collection seriously, and so you have to think about it from a monetary point of view. You can't be foolish with money, but on the other hand, that's never the first issue in my mind. It's never the first thing I think about. For me, it's purely passion, and I am the type of collector that still has early works that really don't have much monetary value, but they have a great deal of nostalgic importance for me. And I think that every object, every artwork you collect kind of builds on itself if you're passionate about it, and it becomes something that, resonates with other objects and artifacts. And in the great kind of lineage of your collection, all of the works are important. It's a funny thing, this collecting for passion. It's got a knows no bounds, but you have to be, of course, tempering your collecting with the fact that you should be responsible about the money that you spend on art. So you have to do your research, but passion all the way is the number one for me. Not investment or financial issues around the work.
Okay. So then now we're on to the subject of money. What should, so I'm looking at a budding art collector. What
Yeah.
should be the average budget if you're looking to start a collection?
That's a tough one to start out. It really depends on your income level, but for the majority of people, when you're going to buy something that's original, you're going to have to jump into the £500 and plus sort of range. So I would say that's probably where you start. And when you start getting up over £1,000, now we're talking about art that, in some ways, is going to have a certain level of quality, and
Mm-hmm.
there'd be a certain kind of let's call it a frame, not literally, but a frame within that work that is going to sort of position it higher than kind of a reproduction or something that you're going to see for sale at an IKEA. I mean, you're getting something that may be one of a kind in the world, if it's a painting or sculpture, and if it's a photograph, it's probably going to be a limited edition print. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're going to have to be prepared to spend at least £500 to sort of move into that world. I think it's easy to start a collection with $100 to £100, and that's how I started. I started quite reasonably with work, but found very quickly within the first year or so that in jumping to that level of say £500, you're into something that's much more considered
I
in terms
see.
of how it's made, how it's presented. You're into work that might be at an exhibition or in a gallery system where there's some research behind it, some writing, critical writing, and you've got something that really has much more of a value. So yeah, that would be probably where I'd start, around £500 for a serious attempt at getting into art collecting.
Okay. Sounds really really useful actually. Is it that just so then looking at kind of the fact that you need to almost ensure that you're making a considered purchase. Is it then
Yes.
important to choose a specific niche, as you've done with works focusing on Black identity and African diaspora, or is it all right to just have a general interest across a variety of areas?
Another good question. I would say that for myself and for most collectors that I know, it's important to have a focus in your collection, like to think about how the work builds on itself. And for that reason, I do think that a specific niche is important. I think that when you're kind of collecting all over the place, sometimes early on you're missing out on, the important storytelling around art. You're sort of kind of more motivated by strictly beauty or strictly price. I think that these are not great indicators about something that's going to have meaning for you over the long term. For me, it's about representing yourself. This is the kind of collector I am. I'm looking for things that speak to me in a very personal way. So there's no way that I can collect outside of a niche. For me, it's about Black identity, and it's from my own search for self. So I would say that for myself and for a lot of young collectors, the collection will have more meaning for you if you kind of focus and make it a certain niche that speaks to you rather than just this is the hot thing, this is the trendy artist for this moment. I don't think that's a good way to go.
You've just kind of made the perfect segue into my next question. Are trends irrelevant then? A lot of people are talking about art originating from China. Should we all start learning about that and focusing on that? Or it sounds like from what you're saying that perhaps not.
Yeah, I really don't think so. I think that you collect what you love, and if it ends up that the artwork becomes something that people start talking about, you may find yourself suddenly, with a collection that other people find valuable. But if you yourself love the work from the start, I think it's all about believing in yourself. I mean, I'm going to say from personal experience, this is what happened to me. I was collecting identity art, which was really seen as something very gauche and sort of very 1980s, and the kind of artists early in my collection were like Glenn Ligon and people that from England like Joy Gregory and others that I think in a lot of ways the art market had sort of thought, oh, these artists are not doing anything anymore, they're past their prime. And very interestingly, just about 10 years into my collecting and sometime in the turn of the century and sort of moving into the new millennium, the art market started to catch the wave of all things African and diasporic, and suddenly stories of immigration and art that featured tropes of race and family and memory suddenly became talked about. And then in America, the new president ends up being African American, and suddenly there's a political aspect to this. And suddenly artwork like from West Africa, for instance, from the 50s, that was a big part of my early collection, Seydou Keita, Malik Sidibé, Samuel Fosso. Suddenly that work was really valuable. I was buying this work when it was very affordable, and I can remember the moment when it exponentially sort of shot up in value, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk about Africa. And the same thing happened for the work that was diasporic, like Joy Gregory and other works, that I had seen through Autograph and organizations like that in London. Work like that I bought early on, Horace Ove and Vanley Burke, Clement Cooper. Suddenly that work was really, really in vanguard again and talked about. And, I just think it's really funny to me because it always had meaning for me. It always had a special place for me about my own identity and thinking about the work through that filter. So it wouldn't really have mattered to me if the rest of the world never caught on. And it is validating and it's great for the value of the collection. But really, it was a personal journey for me that the artwork provided, and the process, the search for it, the research around it, what I learned, the scholarship has been enriching. And I don't think that it really, in the end, matters that much to me that suddenly, you're seen as an authority on black identity in contemporary art. Hey, it doesn't really matter in the end. I've got something that I've built up that enriched my life and hopefully will enrich the lives of others through our curatorial projects. It's not really about it. I caught the trend and isn't that great? I'm not really into that aspect of it.
I see. No, this makes it makes a lot of sense to me. As somebody who's looking at starting a collection, it
Right.
kind of just a lot of the times you read the Financial Times, they talk a lot more as art as an investment or as an asset, etc. And it can, once it has that kind of weight to it, it almost delays your activity because you want to make sure you're buying something that is going to make investment sense. But it's actually quite comforting to hear your journey and to understand how it's just been for you a story almost, or perhaps a reflection of yourself. I imagine if you look at this over the years, it would be a brilliant story to tell the grandkids, eh?
I'll work on having kids. Okay, grandkids. We'll see how that goes. We're a
I
little
just
far
I
off.
just went for that one. I just went for that one.
You
So
did. You
so
did.
what else do you think a budding collector should consider?
Well, it really, really, I think, will have more resonance for you, as I've said, if it's a personal expression. So
Okay.
you have to, I think, have the fortitude to um, read the journals, look at the art magazines, read the blogs, go to the art fairs, but still resist the trend and try hard to sort of think about collecting objects that are going to have meaning for you over time, not in the year 2013, but moving through your life. Are you going to want to have a longer dialogue with that painting, with that photograph that you saw in that book or that journal, in that art show? Are you going to want to have that object in your home, in your life? Um, can you live without it is a question I always ask. Like, you should sort of embrace that obsession to collect and have it a part of your life if you're feeling that burning desire. But you really have to walk away, and that's a very disciplined kind of maneuver. It's something that took me a lot of time, but to sort of go to an art fair like Art Basel Miami or to Frieze and see something that you love, but be able to just sort of walk away from that thing, think about it, yeah, and then sort of like do a little research and then get back to it rather than just going on that impulse. The impulse is good. It's what brings you to the table and kind of makes sure that you sort of are on the right track. But you can't jump the gun with something as sort of expensive as art. You have to really do a little research. If you lose the piece, there's always something else. All of us collectors, we all have great stories of, I could have bought that crystal filly or I
Yeah.
could have grabbed that, blah, blah. And there's going to be another opportunity. I mean, I use that example because I can remember meeting Chris back at the end of the 90s, visiting a girlfriend in London who was at Chelsea and, thinking to myself, geez, I'm looking at these extraordinary paintings. I hadn't really started collecting yet. This is maybe 1996.
Yeah.
I just was at that moment when I'm thinking, well, starting to buy photography. I'm going to be a photo collector. I don't really think about painting that much, even though my brain was saying, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm also thinking to myself, that elephant dung, that's going to smell up my apartment, It was like, you could have got something like affordably that's now, hundreds of thousands of pounds. And, it's funny, like you go on and you'll have many stories like that if you, follow that process of, I've got to think about it. And on the other hand, you really know when something's special. And I've learned how to balance that. Now, if I saw an artist on the caliber of a Crystal Philly, because of the knowledge I have and the experience in terms of, just the eye that you kind of develop, I wouldn't let that go. I'd have to say, okay, I'll put this money down on this, reserve it for me, let me do some research rather than letting it go. I mean,
Okay.
there is a careful balance that you kind of learn over time, and that's the experience that you gain as a collector. It's not a process of just walking in and throwing money down. In fact, I think that that's been a real problem in terms of the art market and how it's been exploited, and in some ways doesn't really reflect reality. Sometimes money's just thrown at things without the consideration. So I don't really believe in that.
Okay. All right, great. This has been really good in terms of covering the what.
Good.
Let's look at the how.
Okay.
What sort of process do you follow before you buy? You touched a little bit on it when you spoke about, maybe perhaps putting down a deposit and going away to do your research. But is there anything else that you do in preparation before you acquire a new piece?
Yeah, great question. If I could sort of say summarize that answer, like summarize things into five sort of essential steps, I would say that firstly, you have to have that emotional response. So I would say the first step, surprisingly, is to kind of ask that question: can I live without this? If I moved on and I let this go, am I going to be regretting this? So the first thing is to really, really move past the, gee, that's beautiful, and wow, that's a really good value for that particular artist's work, and just think on a deeper level. Is this a artwork or an object that I can't live without? So that's the first thing. Like, is it special to you?
Okay.
So, then secondly, you really do have to do some research. The best thing, if it's possible, is to actually meet the artist and do a studio visit. It's not always possible, but I found in building my collection, having a personal relationship with the artist is not only valuable in learning about that particular artwork, but it's enriching, and you start making deeper connections amongst the other artists and artworks in your collection. So having that personal having that personal connection to the artist, I think, is a valuable second step, if it's possible. And then thirdly, I feel like the research part really has to come into play now. So, that third step would be to start learning about the particular artwork, how it sort of relates to that artist's greater body of work. And you can do that these days so easily by visiting blogs and going to the history of the artist, just putting their name into Google and seeing what art shows they were involved with. Try to look for some critical writing about the work. And again, it's not about looking at it as a popularity contest. It's about, does this work have some sort of pedigree? Does it fit into the great scheme of things in terms of the direction of your own collection, in terms of where you want it to go, and in terms of the history of art? Is it important? Or is it something that is just a whim for you? And maybe that's something that you have to reconsider. So that third step about doing the research is critical. I think, fourthly, that it's time to start talking to, the person you're buying it from. And that's usually on the level of an art collector, the gallery, or the artist representative. And I try not to engage in that conversation right away. I try to do those first three steps so that I have a little bit of knowledge. So, you don't come across as being a complete novice and they won't take you seriously. Because, of course, there's that strange kind of culture of the art world where if you say the right things, and I'm not talking about the right verbiage, I'm really talking about if you appear to know a little bit about the artwork or the artist, suddenly the door is open and that person can really, really engage with you, take you a little more seriously, and might even, in the end, see that you're someone that they want to work with and may give you a discount on that artwork because they see that you're putting together a collection where it really fits and they don't want to lose that sort of opportunity. So I find that doing that research, doing those first three steps, and then getting in contact with the gallery is probably the best way to go.
Okay.
And and then finally, that last step in terms of the process of buying is really now looking at the monetary thing. And that requires another kind of research. This isn't about the scholarship around the work. This isn't about the pedigree. This is really now just like looking at it as an investment. That last step is where you sort of go, okay, I'm buying a painting from an artist like Lynette Yadamboachi or something. It's just an example because she's someone whose work I bought several years ago from an art fair, and I could see the beauty in the work, and already she'd reached a level where things were selling out even that day. And then you have to really think, okay, is this the right price point and value for the work? It may be, it may not be, and you have to then make that decision. Can you wait and maybe get another work that's more appropriate to your budget or your collection now that you've seen that it's an artist who you love who fits the rest of your collection? So that's the sort of part where, you know, you've done a lot of research. You might even come to the art fair knowing this is the artist you want to collect. Okay. But then that last step is, do you put the green light on and do it, or do you really reconsider? Because sometimes